morning and welcome to Florence United Methodist Church on this glorious, beautiful sunny fall day here in Florence, Oregon. My name is Pat Rollins. I'm the lay leader, and our pastor, the Reverend Dr. Karen Love Basinger, is taking a few well-deserved weeks off and will be returning to us shortly. So I encourage you to grab that cup of coffee or that cup of tea and just put your feet up and enjoy our virtual worship service this morning.
We walk by faith and not by sight, the gracious words we hear of Him who spoke as none e'er spoke, but we believe Him near. We may not touch His hands and side, nor follow where He trod, yet in His promise we rejoice and cry, my Lord and God. Help then, O Lord, our unbelief, and may our faith abound to call spoke, as none has spoke, but we believe him near.
Our God in heaven, holy is your name. Your reign come, your will done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and help us forgive as we have been forgiven. In the time of trial, lead us into light, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Our God in heaven, holy is your name. Holy is your name.
They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me."
Why are you working so hard? What drives you? What are you trying to achieve? When you say you're trying to get ahead or get to the top, what does that mean? What is ahead? What is the top? It's important to ask questions like these, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, because sometimes it seems like we're riding the escalator up while Jesus is riding the escalator down. It was the same in the Gospels. The disciples were intent on climbing the ladder of success, while Jesus was even more determined to descend the ladder of service. There's a strong element of comedy in the Gospels, I think. The disciples really don't come across as great heroes in any way. Sometimes they seem more like 12 stooges on a sitcom, a bunch of bumbling buffoons who are scoring very low on the get it factor. And nowhere is that more clear than in today's gospel. In every way, Jesus lives by a different script. If you were his campaign manager, you'd be thinking, hey, we're going through Galilee. This is where Jesus has his strongest base of support. We'll get big crowds here. There'll be more page views and media hits, and we'll gain some points in the opinion polls. But Jesus says, no, I know we're passing through Galilee, but I want to keep our presence a secret. I'm much more interested in going deep with a few of my disciples than I am in having big crowds and making a big public splash in a more shallow way. And what Jesus wanted to teach his disciples was even more surprising. I mean, again, if you were his campaign manager, you'd say to Jesus, make promises, make big promises, and be positive, and talk about your achievements and your plans for the future. And Jesus says the very opposite. He says, look, guys, here's what I really want you to know. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed and murdered, and then he'll rise again. Now, I know when many of us hear this, we hear about crucifixion and resurrection, and that's all very familiar to us because of our religious upbringing. We might even believe that this is part of some kind of divine plan, that Jesus is going to be sacrificed to appease an angry God. We may have all kinds of theories about this, but I think it's important to remember the disciples would not have had any of those theories. I think those disciples would have really been shocked by this because of assumptions that they had that I think we would have if we were in their shoes. Our assumptions would be that Jesus is going to win. Jesus is going to be victorious. Jesus is going to succeed. We wouldn't follow somebody that we think is going to be a failure. And so we would assume Jesus has to go out and defeat his enemies and lead a successful campaign and a successful revolution. And we would be expecting, if anything, that we as Jesus' top generals would come in as victors. We would not expect him to say anything about dying. You know, Jesus didn't think that God is our greatest enemy. Jesus seems to think that we're our own worst enemy. Jesus doesn't seem to think we need to be saved from God. Jesus knows we need to be saved from ourselves. So a central part of his plan was to surface and expose this self-destructive tendency in human beings. And if we understand that, then what Jesus says to his disciples about going to Jerusalem and being killed, it starts to make a little more sense. He saw what almost nobody else in his day saw, and really what very few people today see. In the words of Dr. King, Jesus knew that you can't defeat hate with hate or violence with violence. If you say, let's kill all the bad guys, then you guarantee that you become a bad guy because you don't have the wisdom or moral authority to decide who should live and who should die. So Jesus' plan from the beginning was to preach peace, to preach forgiveness, to preach reconciliation, to preach and then to practice. So when he says, guys, here's what I need you to know. We're going to Jerusalem and the Son of Man is going to be murdered and buried and then rise again. He's telling them that we're not going with militia. You're not going to be my guerrilla fighters. You're not going to be my generals in a big battle. We're going to go to Jerusalem and practice what I've preached. We're going to practice peace. We're going to practice nonviolence. When nonviolent disciples follow their master into Jerusalem and violent men come out to arrest him, we're not going to put up a fight. And when this happens, Jesus understands, his death will not be exposing his weakness. It will be exposing the violence of those in power who want to kill an unarmed man who preaches peace. He won't be exposed. They'll be exposed. He won't be defeated. He will use that defeat to overturn their confidence in systems of hate and fear and violence. Well, that brilliance of Jesus made no sense to his disciples. They were just so sure, if your enemy is violent, you have to be more violent. If your enemy is hateful, you have to be more hateful. If your enemy is clever and deceitful, you have to be more clever and deceitful. And they were too proud to even admit that they didn't understand or maybe agree with what they thought Jesus was saying. So they start arguing. And they start arguing about which one of them is the greatest. Who's on top, who dominates. And you can just see how much they don't get what Jesus is really about. So Jesus does something we might call experiential learning with them. He starts by asking a question. What were you arguing about? And they're too proud or ashamed to even answer his question, so they just stay silent. They're kind of, looking at their sandals and the donkey dung between their toes. They're just not wanting to look back at Jesus and give him any kind of a straight answer. So then Jesus takes a child, brings him over, and he puts his arms around the child. He just hugs the child and holds the child. Now I want you to just imagine, he doesn't say a word at first. He just demonstrates this. It's almost like a visual parable for them. What would they be thinking as their leader, their rabbi, their teacher, sits hugging a child after they've been arguing about who's greatest, and after they haven't understood why he could ever think that he would want to go to Jerusalem if something terrible was going to happen to him there? Now, I think we should say first that in Jesus' world, people didn't think about children exactly the same way as we do. Of course, parents loved their children, but there was a lot less romanticism and sentimentality about children. The first thing you think of when you saw a child, it wouldn't be innocence, or it wouldn't be that this child is special or precious or our future or full of potential. I think the first thing you'd think when you'd see a child is insignificant, low in status, not important, not the greatest. And in that light, as Jesus hugs the child, he's overturning, just as he did a few minutes ago, he's overturning their assumptions. He's telling them what they think is first is really last. What they think is last is really first. Life isn't about competition, it's about affection. It's not about how much you achieve or earn, it's about how much you love. It's not about how you climb and compete to get to the top, it's how you care and serve those like this child at the bottom. It's not about being the most important, the greatest, the top dog, the guy at the top of the pyramid. In a word, it's not about hostility and rivalry. It's about hospitality. That's why as he holds that child, he speaks of welcome. Whoever welcomes a child welcomes me, welcomes the one who sent me. There's a fascinating relationship between some words that we know very well. Maybe you've never thought about their relationship. Words like host, hostel, hospitality, hotel, hospice. Someone comes to your door. Will you welcome them as a host or turn them away because you think they might be hostile? Will you make them feel safe through hospitality, or will you send them away in hostility? Will you be for them like a host or a hospital or a hotel, leaving the light on, providing a safe place for weary and sick people to rest and heal, making them feel welcome and at home? Or will you fear them and reject them and keep them at a distance? The Apostle James was right when he said there are two kinds of wisdom and two kinds of desire. There's the desire to acquire that creates competition and fear and hostility. There's the desire to love and serve that creates well-being, safety, and hospitality. There's the wisdom of competition, and there's the wisdom of reconciliation. So there's an escalator up, and there's an escalator down. And Jesus makes it clear. He's heading down to serve, to care, to welcome, to love. So interesting when you start noticing how much of our behavior is about getting up high so that we can look down on others to dominate, intimidate, exploit, distance, defeat, exclude. Makes you wonder, what kind of direction do you want to take in your life? What kind of direction does your church want to take in life? Whose path will we follow? Whose wisdom will we choose? Whose desire will we imitate? Whose way do we trust?
Brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey. We're together on this road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. I will hold the Christ light for you in the night time of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you, speak the peace you long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping, when you laugh, I laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony. Born of all we've known together, of Christ's love and agony. Brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. Let me be your servant. Let me be as Christ to you.
Greetings this morning, folks. We're at Old Faithful Geyser in Yellowstone National Park. Tim's going to take a video for us as we send our greetings and blessings to everybody. Good morning, everybody. As you can see, Tim and I have had the privilege this week of visiting Yellowstone National Park, and behind me is Old Faithful. We thought that you might enjoy seeing Old Faithful erupt. It will last from 1.5 minutes to 5 minutes. You kind of never know. But when you talk about this is God's country, truly, this is God's country. So as Tim and I say, during these very difficult times that we're all having, keep the faith. Bye. So this is Carol again, and we wanted to treat you to a picture of a bison that is right next to Old Faithful. Right after it erupted, we got to see this guy right in the field. They are massive animals, but very fast. So I'm not going to dilly-dally too long taking a picture. Hope you enjoyed our little video. God
Jesus calls us not to compete with one another, but to serve one another. We're not called to judge, but to love. As we conclude our worship today, may we go forth looking for ways that we can answer that call, that God's kingdom may come on earth as it is in heaven. In the name of the risen Christ, amen.